Yo, and welcome back to the Banter Boys podcast. My name is Sanji. With me is Nick. How you doing, boy?
Not too bad. Had a pretty good day. Looking forward to talking some Palace with you.
You did. You did it last episode as well. You told the listeners who we were gonna talk about.
I can't hold it in. I'm too excited.
You know what? I totally get it. Especially after how last season ended. So you know what? Let's jump straight into it. Tell us your name, your Twitter handle, the club that you're representing, obviously, and where you're from, and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I'm Nick. You can find me on Twitter at Correa Ultras. I am a Crystal Palace fan. Have been since I started following the league. And let's see. And then I'm from Ames, Iowa. I work in IT for the university here.
Okay, how's that going?
It's been good. The summer's always our busy time. You'd think, not as busy with student sound and stuff, but that's when we'll do all our projects, updating computer labs and whatnot. So pretty busy during the summer, but it's been good. I like the job quite a bit.
Hopefully it's not keeping you too busy from practicing mocks and, getting ready for your season.
No, I'm still getting a few mocks in, making sure I'm prepared.
How many leagues are you playing in this season?
Let's see. I've got 4 leagues I'm playing in. A couple of the community leagues. I'm in the Super League, and then it'll be my first season in the International Genie League this year. So I'm excited to check that one out.
All right. So do you already know your picks and stuff?
Yeah, I do. I've most of my picks. I've got one at 8 and one at 10.
Okay.
And so those are the two that I do know. And so looking forward to getting those going. I kind of like how the back end of the draft is looking. Picking on that turn, you can pick up some nice, nice back-to-back players. So hopefully I can take advantage of that.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm looking at, Isak, Watkins, Eze, Madison, these sort of players,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, that first round, you can get some really nice duos.
Yeah, definitely. All right, listeners, welcome back to another Inside Trax series. We're here to talk about everything Crystal Palace, but before we get started, we're going to give a quick breakdown of how the episode is going to go. We have 3 main segments. The first one is a bit of a general discussion. We're just going to talk about, the impact of a new manager. He's kind of new. He only had a few game weeks to go, so that's Glasner. We'll find out if anything else has changed at Palace in terms of maybe coaching or some other part of like the hierarchy. And then we'll look back at the previous season's performance versus new season's expectations, old system versus new systems, basically the impact of the transfers that has happened since last summer, the winter, and the current summer as well. And we know we're recording a bit early. I guess to kind of timestamp this is Wednesday, July 24th. So like the window is still going on, preseason is still going on. So I'm sure you're not gonna get all the info you want, but I'm sure we're still gonna have a very, very useful conversation. And then we're gonna, pick Nick's brain about expected formation and starting 11, or at least a regular 11 for the 24-25 season. And then obviously we're gonna chat everything fan tracks. We're gonna get a bit of draft advice. Nick's first pick from Crystal Palace, his next 3 picks, at least one hidden gem, and one of the new segments we added this season was a trap asset as well. And then finally, we'll round things off by picking Nick's brain, getting some advice as an experienced fan tracks manager in our community. Let's chat a bit about, trading draft picks, or, how he spends his fab, or some of his best and worst moments in his career so far. So, Nick, let's get started.
Sure. Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, what's up?
So yeah, right off the bat, I think you've got to start out talking about Glasner, what he's brought to the team.
Well, I almost want to, be like, thanks for everything, Roy, because last time we chatted, I think Roy had just came in to save Vieira or whatever, right? And
yes, absolutely. It was right about that time.
Yeah, and even then you said it was like a bit of a, weird moment bringing Roy back, and he's not really a new manager or whatever. So, like, how did you feel seeing last season, the way, Roy's, I thought his season started okay, but then it definitely started to get a bit foul. I don't know what it was, but how did you feel about that as a fan?
Sure. There was some tough games at the end of the Hodgson era. It felt like, we were watching games where there really wasn't a drive to attack. Yeah. There wasn't the interest in, doing anything more than a 1 goal lead.
Yeah.
It was like, get up one, and then we're going to sit back, 10 back, and we're just, going to be waiting for them to score.
Yeah.
I like had zero hope of a clean sheet ever. It was just like, those are some rough games to watch. And, but it was weird in comparison with Vieira. Roy was a bit of a pickup after Vieira.
Yeah. Yeah.
Palace hadn't scored in, I can't recall exactly, numerous matches,
Yeah.
hadn't won a game in 10 or something.
Yeah.
And it was like, then Roy was actually bringing some form and some comfort to the team, I think was what I kind of was looking at. Largely it was players and they were being asked something that they knew. They were able to recognize their role and like fit into that.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what was nice under Roy. They knew what they were doing and
Yeah.
what Roy was looking for from them.
Yeah.
I think then as we got into the last season,
Yeah.
there started to be some frustrations.
Yeah.
I remember Joachim Anderson. He had multiple statements saying,
Mm.
we've got a great squad. Why are we not going for wins?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
are we sitting back? And Anderson's one of the leaders on that team. So once he started to become concerned, that started really kind of telling me how the locker room was, and that Roy couldn't be lasting long. I honestly didn't see him finishing out the season,
Which is
and so
kind of sad because, like,
it is kind of sad. Legend of the game,
exactly.
long staying. He's from Croydon.
Yeah.
Like, I love all that stuff, and I wish we could have given him, a proper run
Yeah.
out, but
Yeah.
for the sake of the team and what they were building,
Yeah.
totally understand the
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
Um,
You just kind of want to put
and
him out of his misery in a sense as well. You don't want to see him go down like
right,
that.
right, yeah, absolutely. And so, I think in comparison with that, then feeling, like terrible, like, oh, what are we gonna do about Roy? There's no there was Palace fans at all the games ended up signs, lack of ambition,
Yeah.
no forward momentum, those kind of signs, and it was like the fan base was, quite upset.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because at one
and
point you guys were like 15th, I think, mid-February, and like 5 points above the relegation zone. It
oh
was
yeah,
not good.
right. We were hanging right on that relegation line,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it seemed like anybody could pass us. Like,
Yeah.
they needed to win like a game or two and they could get above us.
Yeah,
And so
like
yeah, that's definitely
bizarre moments as well with the whole Elise injury thing, rushing him back, and then he was like, "Oh,
right.
but the physios like cleared him, didn't clear him." Like it was just like something funky's going on.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And when you start wondering like, oh, is Roy trying to save his game over, the long-term health of his players?
Yeah.
It's like I can't reasonably support that,
Yeah, agreed.
Elise and like well, I'm sure we'll touch on Elise a little more,
Definitely, yeah.
but just bummed to see him go. He was one of
Yeah.
my favorite fan Trax players.
Yeah.
And so, hurts to see him gone.
I,
But
I was hoping to like draft him first round this season. Not even.
oh yeah,
Not even gonna lie.
honestly,
like,
I think he would have been an easy first rounder.
Yeah.
Definitely somebody that I would have been looking for, and we'll touch on it later. But that's a huge hole to fill.
Yeah, but you know what? On to bigger and better things. Let's talk about Glasner.
Sure, yeah. And so they bring in Glasner, and honestly, some of the most exciting, fun football I've watched
Yeah.
from Palace.
Yeah.
They so let's see. He had 13 games, picked up 24 points, is what I've got here. And some really good wins in there. It seemed like he was able to implement his system pretty quickly. Looking at his previous work, it was sort of known. There was a lot of talk that he'd be using 5 at the back. He likes to use wing backs, and so there was some kind of concern, wonder from me with Mitchell Ward generally playing a fullback role. It was like, who are we gonna play here? What's the idea going forward? They brought in Daniel Munoz to be one of their wingbacks,
Yeah.
and he's been really fun. Just looks like a hard worker out there, constant pace and energy. And he was pretty fun to watch Copa America.
Yeah. He had some attacking returns. Unfortunately, got a bit hot-headed, missed the final,
A
but
little hot-headed, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, like, yeah, Glasner's really done great things. I think he's had one of the best, I think, points per game earned in a while that I've seen from a Crystal Palace manager. And I know it's a very
Hmm.
small sample size. And I
Right.
think in terms of like last season, you guys had a very strong finish, right? I think you guys equaled both your highest league finish, which was 10th.
Correct.
I think back in like 2014, 2015, and then it was your highest points total, 49, which I think was back in 2018, 2019. So let's hope that maybe he can kind of maintain this moving forward into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at, um, they got that 10th place finish, and
Yeah,
now I'm looking to break into the top half.
definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
Glasner had some success in Europe with Eintracht,
Hmm.
and so I'm, looking to bring us back to Europe. If we could get Palace in Europe, I would be very excited.
Awesome. So let's talk about some of the players from like the previous window. Um, One of the names that I think it was quite useful having him, especially with Ducour's injury throughout the season. Jefferson Lerma. We talked highly
Hmm.
about him, I think, last episode, and he seemed to be a decent ghoster. I know there's another person in midfield that we're definitely going to touch on later. I don't think he was like he's one of the youth players, right? Wharton.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how old he actually is, but yeah, Wharton. And I've been going back and forth in preparation for this conversation just about who I think that midfield's gonna be.
Yeah,
I really lean uh, that it will be a Decore Wharton just because he was playing really well at the end of the season. Wharton was.
yeah,
He seems to have a real knack for the right ball to get through.
yeah,
Just being able to play that ball forward in one or two touches. He seems to have a really good drive forward, which I like a lot in the team because Decore and Lerma both really more of a defensive midfielder.
yeah,
They're gonna sit back, they're winning tackles, but they don't as often play that forward pass. Um,
yeah,
and so I think just kind of for the balance, we're gonna see more Wharton uh, over Lerma.
yeah,
But I do, injuries happen. Lerma's gonna get some game time eventually. And I, depending on form coming in, could see him, overtaking a spot from Adam. I don't know that just because of the youth, how locked in
yeah,
to the team Adam Morton will be,
yeah.
but just based on form, I'm thinking he's got the place to
Yeah.
start.
I mean, even touching on the form of Crystal Palace players, right? Wharton is one of 4 Crystal Palace players that represented England at the Euro 2024 tournament. And I think it was the biggest club representation from the Premier League
Yeah,
as
from
well.
what I saw, which is
Yeah.
pretty crazy. You don't think of little old Crystal Palace doing that. Um,
Exactly, right? But I mean that just speaks volumes of, how competitive that midfield is as well with
right.
like we talked about Decore, Lerma, Wharton. So maybe Lerma is not one you're drafting immediately this season, but maybe a waiver wire pickup if you think he's gonna nail that spot.
Yeah, if I think if there's a point where it starts looking like, oh, Lerma's been picked, game or two in a row, and it looks like he's getting a run of games, he's somebody that I would, if you're looking to get an extra midfielder in,
Yeah.
wouldn't mind looking at him. But yeah, waiver wire tier for me on Lerma. Probably not somebody I'm drafting, but I think he could turn in a decent performance for you.
Nice. So you had a few outs last summer as well. Wilf Zaha, MacArthur, Milivojevic, some big names, right? How do you
Right.
think the team coped without them?
Um, I think I last time we talked, I probably was sounding pretty nervous
Yeah,
about it. I
yeah.
felt like those were some big names to fill,
Yeah,
and I wasn't sure how some of the younger guys would step up. I think it sounds kind of funny, like now, because as A and Elise we're just like tearing the Premier League up.
yeah,
But I was worried about would they be able to, consistently create, make chances for the team. And would they have, the midfield to actually get them the balls? Would
yeah,
we be winning back, able to hold up possession at all?
yeah, yeah.
But I honestly felt a lot more positive at the end of the season than I thought I would going in.
Yeah.
It seemed like there was just so much to replace, so many leaders, and I was worried that there wouldn't be somebody to really like step up
Yeah.
and kind of take over that leadership club for the role. But I think our center backs, Anderson and Gahey,
Yeah.
from what I understand, have both stepped into really big leadership roles for the team. And
I mean, Chris Richards as well, homeboy, right? So he
oh
did
yeah,
quite well
absolutely,
towards the end of the
he
season.
did. Yeah, and so I really like the trio we have of center backs there. I don't know how long Palace holds on to Gahey,
Yeah.
but I think they look like some solid players that I'm pretty confident in turning in a performance.
Yeah, definitely. Mateus Franca, what are your expectations from him this season? You think he's still gonna be like a youth player they slowly bed in?
Yeah, I don't think he's somebody that's going to be cracking games immediately. Maybe some off the bench performances get him some early starts, but I don't necessarily see him breaking into a regular 11 for the squad. I think we've seen some glimpses of what he can bring, that he's, very forward driven, that he
Yeah.
can create. But I think there's still going to be a lot of defensive requirements from him that he's got to catch up on. He looks pretty comfortable in the attack, but I don't know if he is at like the defensive needs to
Yeah.
play in the Premier League.
Yeah.
So I definitely at the moment see him more as a player that will be coming off the bench.
Definitely. Rob Holding came in from Arsenal last summer. He didn't really feature much. What do you think is like? Is he like a free agent sort of pickup on a random game week? Do you think maybe he'll get embedded in? Like, I don't know how preseason is going for you guys. Has it started? Like, where you guys at in terms of everything?
Yeah, we actually haven't played preseason at all. I believe our first game is the 31st, so
There
like
you
a week
go.
from today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we'll definitely get some more information once we start seeing some of those early lineups. Um, just based on what we saw under Glasner, I don't really know if Rob Holding breaks in without an injury. I think he was largely a depth piece, and like they needed that extra depth when it's like, okay, we're gonna have three center backs, so let's get somebody else in.
Yeah.
I feel like he'll be ready to play, has Premier League
Yeah.
experience, but I don't know if, based on how things are going at the end of the season, he's gonna get that start
Mm.
until something happens.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I guess you don't want to be relying on old Joel Ward every season.
Right. I'm really hoping that it's not going to be Joel. Love the guy, great Palace player, but I'm hoping we'll see less and less of him.
Yeah, definitely. One final name from that summer window, Dean
Sure.
Henderson. So my real question is, would you rather Sam Johnston or Dean Henderson in that?
Oh, it's a tough decision for me. I think both showed pretty good games in goal. Good stopping ability. Well aware. Um, it seemed to me that Henderson was the preferred choice. He played, I'm pretty sure, every game under Glasner. Um, and so I think, just based on that he will stay in that. But I don't have a good read on how that actually sits. I know there was some talk about Sam Johnstone being unhappy as a backup and that he wanted to be playing.
Ah, okay.
Uh, but I don't know if he'd be able to force his way out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, let's move on to the winter window. So, I mean, I just to I guess update from the Wharton stuff. He was actually transferred in the winter window from Blackburn Rovers. I completely forgot that. For some reason, I thought he was a youth player from you guys. But he's 20 years
Sure, yeah.
old. He's a kid still. But listen, I think that was probably the situation. Was I think Doucouré was injured for a while, and you guys were maybe struggling in
Correct.
midfield. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, what's more? What else can we add to Wharton's performance? His impact on the team, like he
Oh,
legitimately became like a solid mid 4, mid 5 in any roster last season.
Yeah, he became a really hot name. It seemed like everyone was talking about Wharton,
Yeah.
and like, is he getting into England? Everybody was, kind of hyping up those performances, and he kept dropping really good performances.
Yeah.
He's one that I definitely will have an eye on, come, oh, I don't know, like sixth round or so. I
Interesting.
honestly,
Okay. Where is he? Where is he go? Where has he gone in like mocks and stuff for you so far? Would you say?
um, I've been seeing him about. So in like a 10 man, I think I've usually been seeing him go like late sixth, seventh round.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because
he's
like
been,
the thing is, mids are so hard to come by. I find this
and I think
season.
that is what a lot of it is coming down to.
Yeah.
People hoping that Wharton's going to pick up a lot of minutes and be a productive midfielder for them.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, because of a lower amount of mids there, I think is kind of what's driving him up.
Yeah, because I'm just looking back at a mock that I did right before we started recording. I think
Sure.
in a 12-man mock he went late round 9.
Okay.
So maybe around that 9-10 mark. I mean, I don't hate reaching early in the 8th round because the thing is not all mocks have like very active managers drafting at the
Sure.
time, so you assume
Yeah.
the pool is going to be even harder to pick from. So there's a chance that yeah, your hand could be forced, and you if you need a dependable mid and you think Wharton is going to have, let's say 20 to 25 starts or
Yeah.
75% of the season, some of that, you're probably going to
Sure.
want to grab him there.
Right. And that's I think where a lot of my decision making comes down to.
Yeah.
I do think Wharton's going to pick up a majority of the games. I think that, Decore Lerma is probably the closer handcuff.
Yeah.
But that my thinking is kind of that Wharton's going to prove himself pretty indispensable, and that's why I'm pretty like high on him, and so I think that's kind of why I probably have driven his numbers up a bit. But
Fair
I
enough.
think
I,
he's
I
going to
mean,
be a really creative
yeah.
midfielder.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you at the end of the day, you have to enjoy the game that you're playing as well, right? I mean,
Yep,
if
absolutely.
you can win while drafting your favorite players, that's the best way to play this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If there's a player you really like and like they play well as a fan Trax player, I always think you should grab them. Like
Exactly.
it's
And that's why I love Eze, actually. Like
Oh yeah, yeah. It's always fun having Eze in your team because he seems so happy. He looks like he's having a great time out
yeah,
there, and then also putting up great games all the time. Hard
exactly.
not to have him in your team.
Exactly. All right, one final name that we definitely have to
Okay.
talk about from that winter window, Munoz. He became.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, listen. If you're part of the Banter Boys Discord, and Nick, you're an active member there, you
I
know
am.
how much hype there was around Munoz last season, and he
Oh
did not
yeah.
disappoint.
No, no, absolutely not. I think he was probably one of the more hyped players last season in the Discord. The Munoz Hive was running strong. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, it just seems like he's a very active wing back, which
yeah,
is like I've always had a preference fullbacks, wingbacks. If I can get them as my defenders, I really like grabbing them just because you're getting at least a shot at some attacking returns. Getting some crosses and key passes in. Something that largely your center backs aren't getting. Um, and so like I liked the idea of Munoz even, to begin. Like sure, let's see what he's got. Um
he looks like
but
he
yeah,
just lives in the box like a striker at times as well.
oh, yeah, it's incredible how often you like look across the front line and Daniel is right up there, like and it's like, wait, do we have a winger? Or is it Dan, And so I do like that a lot. If somebody can, get as far forward as he does, as often as he does, um, and I also didn't feel like he was that he was like leaving Palace bare,
Yeah,
at the in the defense. It seems like he gets back.
yeah,
He always is running his heart out back
yeah,
there, and so like I like to see that. Get some good tackles in.
yeah.
I think maybe my only like downside to him is he does, like you were mentioning earlier, he does seem to have a bit of a temper.
Yeah,
And so he could be a bit of a card magnet, but
yeah, yeah.
we'll see if how we can get that under control. But and I'm generally not too worried. Like, I don't know about you. Do you think about cards when you're like drafting,
No,
or like,
no.
yeah, I hardly think about. It's just an incidental thing. Like, maybe they get one here and there, but I don't really, focus on.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I mean with the adjustment for like the goals conceded as well for
True.
defenders. I mean, we might as well just chalk it up to, oh, okay, I'm gonna forget about yellow cards.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Pretty minimal
Yeah.
change there.
Exactly. All right, so let's look at the card window. We obviously have to talk about the big exit from Palace, Elise. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Oh, it hurts.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like can't even look at the France games because it's
Yeah.
just like, oh, he could have been doing that for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a mixed bag. He was gonna go eventually. I
Yeah, for
don't
sure.
think
Yeah.
any Palace fan felt that we were holding on to him long term, and so I was preparing myself for it. It seemed like he might have gone to Chelsea last season, even.
Yeah.
And things were really ramping up there. And so like I was more or less prepared. But what I was kind of telling some friends, I just felt like I wanted one more season of Elise.
Yeah.
It felt like I didn't get enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's still young. You never know. He might come back.
Yeah, that's true. I'll hold out for him coming back. Um, but no, I can't begrudge him playing in Champions League.
Yeah.
He's a very, very talented player.
Yeah.
I think he deserves it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be too long before, you start hearing him alongside some of the big names,
Yeah. Definitely.
Um,
Definitely.
he's just so talented.
He's so good. A couple of other outs, and I think these are just like you know, club legends in a sense.
Sure.
At least one of them, James Tompkins,
Absolutely.
Jairo Riedewald, and Nathan Ferguson. Man, a kid just that was always injured and barely got to feature.
Right. Yeah, you feel bad for Ferguson. It never seemed like he got a real run
Yeah.
of being healthy. It would be
Yeah.
like oh, Ferguson's back and then he's down
Yeah.
injured.
Yeah.
It just seems like he never really got that shot to show what he could do.
Yeah,
So,
it's like
I
that
get
South
why.
Park meme, and it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I get why he was one they didn't hold on to, but
Yeah,
I do kind of feel bad for the guy.
definitely.
But yeah, largely none of those huge losses.
Yeah.
I don't think they were playing super regularly. Riedewald never really broke into the team.
Yeah.
And so good luck to him.
Yeah, exactly. So, a few names came in. I'm going to guess that both Chadi Riyad and Jemiah Omolu are both youth signings.
I
Because
believe so.
yeah.
Those names aren't ringing a bell to me either.
Exactly. Because the main name I think we should talk about is Daichi Kamada, coming in from Lazio. A lot of hype around him as, possible Olise replacement. But I think there's also another name that you have in your notes that you can talk about. So can you tell us a little bit about both of them?
Yeah, sure. So the two, I don't know, big signings, Kamada, of course, and then it's sounding like Ismail Sarr
Yeah.
is close to signing a deal with Palace.
Yeah.
I don't think the medical's done or like an actual fee agreed with Marseille, but I believe the player and Crystal Palace have agreed a contract, and so then it's just lining things up with Marseille.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can talk a little bit about them. Kamada, I'm pretty interested in. He's played for Glasner before at Eintracht.
Yeah.
And if you read some interviews from Glasner about him, he talks very highly of him, saying that he's just a player that I think he used the phrase implicitly trusts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so like that's what kind of turned my eye. I was like, oh, like not only do you like the guy, think he's a good fit, you
Yeah.
feel that you can like trust him to do the job.
Definitely.
Really, and he was commenting a lot on how he liked his ability to play that, kind of like what we were talking about with Wharton, that he liked his ability to play that quick
Yeah.
ball through to the striker, to one of your to Eze, something like that.
Yeah.
And so that I believe he'll be playing the right side, kind of where Olise was. But what's thrown me off is that largely Kamada's played through the middle,
Mm,
be it a center mid, a center attacking mid. And so I think there's got to be a few stylistic changes there.
mm,
I don't think Kamada's truly a winger.
yeah.
As much, maybe he'll play more inverted,
Mm,
driving in more. But I'm curious to see how that plays out. But I'm excited about Kamada, just kind of on the hype that Glasner's given him. Seems like he is a pretty talented player, played in a top league, and so that's always a good sign for an incoming player.
yeah.
Um,
What about Sar?
Sar is another. So I'm also interested to see what we'll get from Sar.
Yeah.
I know that he was also looked at as a replacement for Wilf. Uh, there was a lot of talk, that they were going to make a bid for him. And so he's been on Palace's radar for a while, I know. And so it's always interesting to see when they'll actually pull and, go after somebody. Uh, I don't know that Sar is like an out and out starter.
Mm,
I think that, maybe he gets a few here or there. I think there, also could be some concern about Eze leaving still.
yeah.
And so then you'd need somebody to fill that spot. But he's got Premier League time, which I think is big. We all know that it's an adjustment period, getting used to the Premier League.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big bit of it. A bit older of a player can bring
Mm,
some, guidance, experience to the team.
yeah.
Um, and, he has played some decent bits, but I think he's not, the total game changer that we
Right.
saw under like Olise. I
Yeah.
even don't think he has like the explosive ability of like Eze. Um, and so that's I guess why I'm a bit lower on it.
Mm,
He feels more like a depth piece than he does,
yeah.
somebody that's gonna really break into this team and, change up how they're playing. Um, and so, I'm excited. I liked watching him at Watford.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like he looked good. I like his length. He's a big guy for a winger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think he can bring some exciting stuff. If he shows up in good health,
Yeah.
adapts to the system.
Yeah.
I think there's just more unknowns there than with Kamada, who it seems like is pretty lined up to break into the team almost immediately, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah. 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 I mean, implicitly trust is what you said, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Those are some strong words, man.
Right, those are some big words from Glasner. And so yeah, it just seems like that would,
Yeah.
blend a little easier,
Yeah.
perhaps pick up the system because we do know that it's a similar system to what he's played previously.
Yeah.
Um
So I mean,
and-
let's then touch on expected formation and starting 11.
sure, sure. So I think I kind of mentioned it up at the top, but usually we're seeing Glasner play with five at the back, um, two holding mids,
Mm-hmm.
and then three up front. Usually, they're not as much wingers they're a little closer in, I guess. Kind
Yeah.
of more of an attacking mid role than
Yeah.
general, a little more inverted. Um, with the wingbacks bringing a lot of the crossing, the width to the team. But yeah, so that's kind of the formation, and then I can just walk through what I am thinking is their lineup.
Yeah. Sure.
So I said Henderson, I think keeps the goal spot.
Okay.
Um, I don't have any changes then in our back five. So just going across, I've got Munoz, Anderson, Richards, Gahey, Mitchell.
Yeah.
I don't, no big signings. I don't see any real shakeups outside of, late
Yeah.
injury or something.
Yeah.
I think they run that one back.
Yeah.
Um, then I think things get more interesting once
Yeah.
we get to our midfield. I've been going back and forth. I can't quite pick out how it's going to line up. I
Mm.
think we know we can get the like majority of the players.
Yeah.
But I could still get, get a wrench thrown in my plans and
Yeah,
have that
yeah,
totally
yeah.
changed up. But in the midfield, I'm thinking for holding mids, Decore,
Yeah.
Wharton.
Yeah.
And then above them, Kamada starting,
Mm.
Eze starting,
Yeah.
and then Mateta
Yeah.
for our forward.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, do you think there's a possibility that maybe given the opposition, like let's say you come up against like say a Liverpool or Man City, there's a chance that we may see a three in midfield. So like maybe Kamada
Yeah,
Sarr is dropped for like Lerma. So you have Lerma, Doucouré, Wharton, and then you got Eze Mateta up top. But then you're playing against an Ipswich, but then you drop one of Lerma, Doucouré, Wharton and give it to Kamada Sarr. Do you think there's a possibility of that?
that yeah, that's absolutely something I've been tossing around. I think
Mm,
we might see a little more flexibility. Um, and just being able to have those options, I think will, kind of give Glasner the ability to change up the lineup a little bit,
yeah,
bring something different.
yeah,
Whereas last season there was injuries and it was like
yeah,
we can kind of run out this team. That's
yeah,
what we got.
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't, like we saw Chris Richards playing in the midfield.
yeah, yeah,
They were making some choices that less than ideal,
yeah.
but so I think yes, a little bit more depth. They should be able to, play around with that lineup a little more. And I am curious if we see a three-man midfield in some of those tougher games.
Yeah.
Bring Lerma in for a little more defensive solidity.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's now move on to our next segment, which I think everyone wants to talk about, is the fan track side of things.
Sure, absolutely. That's what
So
they're here for.
exactly right. So give us your first pick from Crystal Palace. I think it's an obvious one, though.
Right. I think this one's obvious. It's going to be Eze in the first round for me.
Yeah.
I don't think that Eze is perhaps like a top 5 or so pick,
Mm-hmm.
but that back half of the back half of the first round,
Yeah.
I think is great time for Eze.
Yeah.
Kind of tucked right into that second tier of mids.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, first pick, I'd have no problem grabbing Eze there. I think there was some talk about him being injury prone, some worries about that side. I don't know how much I buy into that
Mm.
as much as I do look at Hodgson and how he was using players.
Yeah.
So I'm not, so I personally am not discounting Eze for injuries any. He was pretty healthy previous.
Yeah.
Didn't see injury after injury,
Yeah.
and so I feel like he should be able to play a majority of the games.
Yeah.
Going to be the first one on the lineup sheet every time.
Yeah.
And is going to be pretty central to Crystal Palace's creation.
Yeah,
Um,
especially with
and-
Elise out, you'd think a lot of the
Oh,
set pieces and
absolutely.
stuff go through him as well, right? Possibly
Right,
penalties.
yeah. Mateta took quite a few penalties, but
Right.
we could see. I would think that set pieces are going to be almost entirely Eze, which we love the people taking set pieces,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's always good to note. And I don't. That's a good question on penalties. I don't have a good feel on that one, but
Okay. Okay.
but yeah, Eze, loving how he looks late first round.
Definitely. All right. Next 3 picks. Who do you got and where you taking them?
Sure. So you can probably pick these up just from some of our previous conversation. Probably my next one up would be Munoz.
Okay.
I'm honestly starting to slot him in, not like a Trippier or a Trent,
Yeah.
but maybe like one group under.
Definitely,
I
yeah,
think he's
yeah.
going to be a very I don't know, a hot asset. People are going to want him.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind looking at him, fourth, fifth round.
Mm.
I don't think there is a ton of like quality defenders.
Yeah.
And so
With like a high ceiling at least.
right.
Yeah.
That ceiling is more what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Most defenders I'm usually kind of looking at on a streamer level.
Yeah.
In my mocks I haven't been taking defenders before, 6, 7, trying to make sure I get some quality mids forwards first.
Yeah.
So I would look at Munoz, fourth, fifth, but be willing to wait on him. I don't think defenders are the players that you want to be like going for right away.
Yeah.
Usually you can kind of leave them. And that's why I recommend doing some mocks,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
seeing where things are falling, how long you can wait on somebody. That's like some essential drafting info.
Yeah, definitely. After Munoz, who do you have?
Then I'm going for Mateta. Mateta ended the season on some incredible form.
Yeah.
He
Four
it was
goals on
just
the last day, was it?
yeah, I believe so. And so when you've got somebody scoring him like that,
Yeah.
it's he's definitely going to be on my eye.
Yeah.
I feel like he should be the starter.
Mm.
Edwards seemed like he kind of fell out of favor
Yeah.
under Glasner.
Yeah.
Like he basically only played maybe 10, 15 minutes like at an end of a game.
Yeah.
And so I expect Mateta to be the go-to guy
Yeah.
through the season. And based on how Palace was playing, pretty attacking minded, creating chances. That gives me a good feeling about Mateta. It used to largely be like, oh, Palace striker, not touching that.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think he could be, a solid pick here.
Yeah,
I'm
I
looking.
I was when I was doing my mock, it really came down, I think, round 5. I was deciding between Mateta and Munoz, and I went Mateta. Where I'm just curious, where would you have gone with that one?
Um, that's one that I largely probably would base on the team I already had.
Yeah,
You
great
know,
point. Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
like if I didn't have a forward at all,
Yeah.
obviously that's going to be Mateta for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I had, oh, I don't know, like a Holland or somebody,
Yeah.
a top elite forward,
Yeah.
I would probably lean Munoz just for squad
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah. Great
Um,
shout. Great shout.
so that's probably where I would kind of lean on that one. But I do agree and have been seeing those two right about the
Yeah.
same places. That it's
Yeah.
like Munoz, Mateta,
Yeah.
and I'm always like, oh, this is tearing my Crystal Palace fan heart. I don't want to make that decision. But
Exactly. Who's the third pick that you have from the 3?
and then the next one I'd go for would be Wharton.
Okay.
Um, I think that he's gonna have a little more of the attacking mindset. Actually be able to get some more of those key passes, ghost a little better than like Decore, for example,
Okay.
who we largely see sitting back doing the defensive work. And so yeah, I like Wharton. We had kind of touched on him, 6th, 7th round.
Yeah.
Start feeling him out,
Mm.
seeing and he's also a player that I think will slot in pretty easily to your midfield. Like he's going to be starting on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think he's got a decent floor to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what I like about Wharton
Yeah.
there is I think that if you're just looking for that extra player to, kind of round out your team,
Mm.
he could slot in there.
Yeah, because I remember even latter end of last season, he was taking a few corners as well. So
He was, yeah.
if you even have that Eze pick, you could probably lock off the set pieces for Crystal Palace with both Wharton and Eze, right?
Yeah, that's a great call. And I think, anytime you can get some of those, handcuffed players,
Yeah.
I think if you can lock down set pieces with them, I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty good look.
Yeah, definitely.
And it seems like they're interested in creating, making chances, so they'll be getting set pieces. I like
Yeah.
that show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So who have you got as your hidden gem?
We talked about him a little. I've got Franca here.
Okay.
I think he's just with some of the uncertainties I was talking about with how how those wingers will line up or attacking mids. I think he might be able to sneak his way into some time.
Mm.
Like I was saying, I don't think it's coming early, but if you feel like, oh, I've got a really strong squad, I could make a stash pick.
Yeah.
I don't mind Franca and could see him turning up
Yeah.
for you. And I think that also changes depending on how you feel about Eze. If you do feel that Eze is a
Yeah.
injury prone person,
Yeah.
then I largely view Franca as the person who's going to come in for him. So
Yeah. Okay.
so that how I would kind of think about
Okay.
it. Like, do you think Eze is going to play 30 games,
Yeah.
or if not, then who's going to play those games?
I'm surprised you didn't mention Kamada as a possible gem instead of Franco. Like, are you
Sure, sure.
so
So
yeah, go ahead, go ahead, saying.
for me, that's entirely a how I was thinking about it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
hidden gem, we got to go deep.
yeah.
This is gonna
Fair
be
enough. Yeah,
somebody who is
yeah,
not,
yeah, definitely.
a regular in the
Yeah,
11.
yeah.
That's kind of how I was thinking about it.
Fair
But
play.
yeah,
Yeah, fair play.
I absolutely would be. If I were to list out like my next four picks,
Yeah,
Kamada probably would have been next
yeah.
up.
Fair, fair.
Um, and
Okay,
so yeah,
interesting. So
that's kind
what
of
what about your traps then?
yeah. Um, I there aren't there wasn't a ton of players. Like I think if they are in my starting 11 that I
Mm,
listed out,
yeah,
I would feel relatively okay drafting those players. Um, the two that I thought of for traps were players that I just don't think are getting regular starts.
mm,
So I've got Edward and Lerma down.
mm,
Um, they're both players that, maybe you pick up off the waiver wire because you hear they're getting a start,
yeah,
or somebody gets injured and it's like, oh, they're going to be next up on the list. I like it there, but I don't see right now with a fully healthy Palace them cracking into that 11, and
yeah,
so I would be very wary to grab them. I think people might like look and be like, "Oh, that's a name, I recognize. Like, let me grab them."
yeah, yeah,
But I'm here to warn you, trap material.
yeah. You know who I was kind of nervous about possibly drafting from Palace this season was
Who's that?
Mitchell, because
Okay.
I feel like Mitchell has these games where he could probably get you like 15, 20, 25 points, but then there's this like odd game he's gonna get like a 1 or a 2, and it's
Yeah.
like, do you just roll with the punches for that one?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up. I was kind of curious about that as well because I definitely view Munoz as like the true wingback, and
Yeah,
I kind of looked at
exactly.
Mitchell
Yeah,
as like, okay, maybe he can play, but he doesn't. I don't feel he has quite the same attacking upside that Munoz does.
yeah,
Doesn't get nearly as far forward.
yeah,
But I was looking at their points per start under Glasner,
yeah.
um, and I have Mitchell here at 9.3 points per start, which
Okay.
for a defender, isn't too shabby. Kind of
Yeah,
lines up with what you're saying. It seems like he can drop a big game,
yeah.
and then then all of a sudden it'll be like, where'd Mitchell go?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and so I'd like to see if we start getting into games and it's like, oh wow, Mitchell's putting a lot of crosses in. Oh, it looks like he's getting farther forward. Then I might start looking at him more.
Yeah,
But Mitchell, yeah, I feel like he's close to being in that trap territory as well, just because he has a tendency to, or not. I don't know if I'd call it even a tendency, but there
mm,
are those games that he just like blanks, and it's
yeah.
like,
It's just
what are we doing
unpredictable.
here?
Yeah, it's
He's
weird.
kind of unpredictable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other assets you want to talk about, or shall we move on to the final segment?
Hmm. Let's move on to the final segment.
All right, Nick, it's time to pick your brain. Uh,
All right.
I've got a few questions for you. Do you have any experience with trading draft picks by any chance?
Um, I actually haven't traded I think an individual. I haven't done any draft trading. I
Okay.
think, and the reason why I can kind of explain why is to me it's sort of an unknown value thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in season it's a lot easier to know value.
Yeah.
But before the season is even started, it's hard to say like, oh, I think there's, sure value and it's like a clear upgrade
Yeah.
if I jump up, 2, 3 spots.
Yeah.
Things get a little different, I think, if you can like grab, a first or second spot where
Yeah.
there's like a clear top 3.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
But I generally have a hard time with those
Yeah.
valuations, and so I kind of have just steered away.
Yeah, fair, yeah, fair. That seems to be like a general consensus, to be honest. Like even some of our mates like Robbie P, he talks about sometimes it is a bit of a mad scene trading draft picks before your season's even started. Like it's
Right.
purely
I
a
think
lottery, right? So
exactly, yeah. I think it can be so much chance in
yeah,
that
yeah.
that a lot of times I just don't want to
E- e-
try it out.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about waivers slash FA claims. So when you make your claims on
Mhm.
a week to week basis, do you look at form? Do you look at fixtures? Do you look a bit of both? Like, what's your general strategy?
Yeah. Um, so largely, the first thing I'm looking at is the upcoming fixtures.
Mm,
I really like when I'm working the waivers to find a player that not only would have single week value,
yeah,
but if I'm lucky, would be somebody that can stay in my team for, 5, 6 weeks,
yeah,
or if things really go well, becomes a more, locked in starter to
yeah,
my team.
yeah.
Um, and so the first thing I'm really looking at is fixtures.
Mm,
If I can find somebody with 3, 4 good games, on the waiver, that's always, I don't know, my first interest. If there's two players I'm feeling really tight about,
yeah,
then I'll kind of fall to form.
yeah,
Who's been bringing the better games? Have they been playing tougher competition? But first and foremost, I'm kind of thinking about like the overall, kind of in a like an original fantasy way. I'm
yeah.
thinking about my squad value and how
Yeah.
I can kind of grow that.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. All right, let's talk about some Palace assets that you could recommend maybe buying low or selling high around the start of the season.
Sure. Um, I think So what I like about Palace is that I think they haven't, even though they were playing a lot better at the end of last season, I don't know that they have gotten to the point where like everybody's talking about Palace players. And so I think they've got some really good options for buying low on. Um, I think players like Munoz or
Mm,
Wharton.
mm,
Um, while they have some good hype like in the Fantrax community, I think if you're, kind of smart about who you're talking with, if you kind of figure out how much they're valuing those players, you could probably find some deals on people who just don't have as much faith in the Palace project.
yeah,
Um, I would, look at those as players that I think could grow more into the system, become more comfortable with what they're doing. They'll have had, now a full preseason under Glasner working with those tactics.
yeah.
And so those would be two players that, were recent signings
Mm.
and, haven't fully worked into the team that I could see, improving from what we saw last year.
Okay, yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, I love Munoz, and yeah, Wharton is just a gem of a player to look forward to as he develops in the Premier League. What about sell high assets?
Yeah. It, there This one was a tough one for me.
Mm,
I think Mateta's probably my like first choice as like somebody that I'd sell high on.
mm,
Um I think that if you have somebody who looks at, oh, 4 goals in the last game, however many, like
yeah,
10 goals over, their last 5.
yeah,
He looks like a player that, should be banging them in.
yeah.
um, but I don't know that we have that.
Mm,
We talk about losing Olise. Olise was one of the most common crossers or
yeah,
creators for Mateta.
yeah.
Um, and that, I just wonder how quickly will that start off. And so
Mm,
you might be able to find some good sell high value there just because he hasn't like fully locked in. Needs a new creator. Those, working with Kamada, are
yeah.
they going to have that same feel between them?
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, yeah, good shout, good shout. All right. In terms of Fab, do you use it, and how do you typically budget it across the season? Like, what's your strategy? Do you blow
Yeah,
everything on a hot new transfer, or do you kind of like spread it out?
sure. I'm definitely somebody trying to spread it out over the full season, and what really turned me towards that was when you get to like the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks,
Mm,
and there are players who have been, um, locked out. They can't make any more waiver claims because they're out of fab.
yeah,
And so it's like, if you can be the player now and you were careful, you saved up your fab over the time, and now you can, be dropping and grabbing basically anybody you want.
yeah,
Um, that feels great at the end of the season and can like totally swing, get in playoffs,
Yeah.
get you, promoted, that kind of stuff. And so I really like being able to have the option to make claims at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I largely, like you were talking about the big splash on a new signing, I'll largely kind of stay away from those.
Yeah.
I think it can be so hard to guess what a new player will do.
Mm.
Are they going to have an immediate impact? Are they going to immediately break into the team? You know, will they be successful in that role if they do break into the team? There's so many, kind of unknowns
Yeah.
that even like the most sure player, I don't
Yeah.
know if they're that sure.
Yeah.
And I often also find people overspend quite a bit on those big names.
Yeah.
That they'll be willing to drop down all of their fab or something in one go.
Yeah.
Um,
Perfect example was James Ward-Prowse last season.
right. People were debating, is he worth, my full fab? And it's like, I don't know if he was. And especially, is he worth it at the risk of not being able to make the claims you want
Yeah.
the rest of
Exactly.
the season?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, largely I'm trying to spend, I like to, I don't know that I really will make a claim that's more than like 10% of what I've got.
Yeah.
Usually keep them pretty small.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let's talk about some of your best and worst trades. Maybe last season. Do you have any examples?
Yeah, when I was trying to think about this, one actually came up right away, and Crystal Palace relevant.
Oh.
Um, right. So, in Super League, I I owned Elise,
Yeah.
and a manager offered me Eze,
Yeah.
and I turned that one down.
Yeah.
Largely, I was thinking about. I didn't know if I wanted to stack Palace players,
Yeah.
because like you got Elise and Eze. If they're starting,
Mm.
you got to start in your
Yeah.
lineup.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving them on the bench.
Yeah.
But then it was like, am I putting too much? Am I putting too much in one team?
Yeah.
If Pals didn't play as well as they had, maybe I would have made the right decision. Elise ended up sitting out a lot of those games, and it's like I could have used
Yeah.
some production over those game weeks, maybe as they could have been, turning me towards looking at promotion instead of I think I finished fourth.
Yeah.
And when it's as tight as it comes, those are always tough decisions to make, like, will this actually move me up? And so that's one that I regretted. I regretted not getting Eze.
Yeah.
But let's see. I'm trying to think if I've had any like really successful trades. I was telling the people in my new league this year, I was like,
Yeah.
I can be kind of a hesitant trader, so
Yeah.
keep on me,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
often find it hard to agree that they've got the better,
Mm.
that they've got the better deal, and I also am not being ripped off,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so that kind of back and forth.
Yeah. I think open, honest communication is what kind of makes trades a lot easier than just sending a trade to some unknown face in your league. You need to have a
Right, yeah.
conversation with it, because then chances are it's going to go a lot better than just a yes, no, yes, no.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Anytime I kind of just get in sending trades back and forth, no
Yeah.
communication, it's like
Yeah.
I'm not even that interested
Yeah.
in doing
Exactly.
a trade with you.
Exactly.
And so yeah, that's also that's probably my bigger trade tip.
Yeah.
Look at what the other teams around you have.
Mm.
Because usually you can find a smart trade that
Mm.
helps both teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, one team's looking for a mid.
Mm.
I have more mids than I could use.
Yeah.
And I need a forward back.
Yeah.
Usually you can find those kind of balances where you're both getting something you want. And so those are the kind of trades I like.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Finally, what are some lessons learned from previous seasons? All your years playing Fantrax. What would you say to like new managers to Fantrax that are trying it for the first time this season, or even veterans?
Sure. I think the biggest thing that I've been thinking about going into this season is how important that draft is.
Yeah.
I think everything begins with the draft. the teams that you see that, kind of breeze through the season
Mm.
had a great draft.
Yeah.
The players that are very considerate in their drafting and going through and trying to set themselves up for a successful season.
Yeah.
I think you're just getting yourself off on a better foot than any others. And so I've been really focusing on draft prep, mock drafts, kind of getting a better feel so that I can hopefully take advantage when people are reaching or if they let somebody drop too far.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that I want to try and capitalize on.
Yeah.
And so I've been really thinking about the importance of the draft and just how it can really make or break your season. Not to put like a ton of pressure on it, but I've been really thinking about, the importance of the draft.
Yeah.
So that's
definitely.
one kind of piece. And then
Yeah.
I also on like the flip side of that,
Yeah.
I think you also need to be able to recognize that most of the players you draft, like I don't know, the back half of your draft
Yeah.
is probably going to be around waiver territory.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of moving in and out of your team,
Yeah.
and being able to keep that attachment separate,
Yeah.
not get too attached to a player,
Yeah.
oh, they're my favorite player. If they're, on the waiver line, if that's about the level of player they are,
Yeah.
you got to be just ruthless and cut them,
Definitely.
And so I think that's kind of the other side of draft preparation
Yeah.
is knowing that a lot of those players you're going to be waiving, getting like no value out of.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. All right. I think that's all we had planned to talk about, listeners. Nick, it was an absolute pleasure catching up with you, mate. Everything
Oh,
Crystal
absolutely.
Palace. Do you
Yeah.
have any final words before we sign off?
I hope you all have a great season. I hope I provided some good tips and advice for you all. And up the Eagles.
Love it. And I mean, if you want more information or you have more questions you want to ask Nick, definitely join the Banter Boys Discord. I'm sure, Nick, you've had a great time in there since you
yeah,
joined.
it's a great Discord. If you're not in there, I would definitely join. Great discussions. There's mocks going on all the time. Very friendly community. It's a lot of fun.
Definitely. All right, listeners. What can I say? Just listen to Nick's advice, right? And, you'll be set for the rest of your season. I think the next episode that we have coming up, I've got to check my calendar. Does it even matter, though? Does it? I don't know. Maybe it does. But
A little
bit. It's going to be Nottingham Forest. So it's going to be great to catch up with them, especially after how their season ended with the points deduction and, all that drama about relegation, etc., etc. Yeah, I can't wait for that chat. But listeners, stay tuned. Inside Track series is a go. It's going to be fun. We've got so many interviews on the way. So yeah, I'll just catch you on the next one. Peace.